who we are is based on where we come from, how our own parents interacted. Was there divorce in the family? In some cases, was there abuse in the family? There's something called, and counselors refer to in psychologists, idealistic distortion. The bottom line, if I had just one very short piece of advice for someone that's dated, expectation is understand that there are huge emotions washing through you.
I must say that a few years back, I did not even know what premarital counseling was. And when I heard about it, I must admit that I was a bit skeptical, but the skepticism was coming more from my own romantic, fairy tale, idealistic perspective that true love should effortlessly facilitate understanding and comprehension.
Right.
And premarital counseling at that point in that regard seemed like an effort, like an artificial means to achieve understanding. Does that make sense?
It does, it does.
I thought about it more, the premarital counseling concept, and I agree with it now. It makes so much sense. And right now, sometimes I think about it more and I almost feel like we devote significant resources to wedding planning and festivities and celebrations, what have you, without investing enough in our future.
Yes.
And by going through something like this, premarital counseling, and developing a deeper and like a nuanced understanding of your partner, I feel is comparable and beyond the limitations of what dating has to offer. Because dating is often offers a very optimistic picture.
It does.
So yeah, I think it is worth the investment.
Exactly. Yeah, and to your earlier point, it makes a lot of sense. Because premarital counseling, even though it's got the word marriage in it, it really is about you as a person and the person you are with at that time. And so it's not only understanding the relationship, the dynamics of being with someone, but also, I think more importantly, understanding yourself and knowing more about yourself and the kind of person that you need with you and becoming really a better partner. So that will help you in any context, whether you're talking about marriage or just relationships in general that you have in life.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, that I know we call it premarital counseling, but some of the things that as I was reading up and coming up with questions that we're going to talk about today, it almost felt like two people in a long-term serious relationship can use these concepts.
Correct. That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the interesting things about premarital counseling, there's many, and what has given rise to premarital counseling, of course, has been the very high divorce rates that we've had in this country.
Yeah.
You often hear the 50% number, and in a few years ago in 2022, they did a fairly involved study, and first-time marriages, about 43% end in divorce. That's a very high percent, and that has given rise to the whole, study and effort by many, whether religious or even civil groups that are pushing some type of premarital counseling. In some cases, some states, some municipalities require you to go through that, some basic level before they'll grant you a marriage license.
Really?
Yes, they do ask you to do that, to have a meeting with a person that's designated just to go through that. But one of the interesting statistics that I found very interesting about premarital counseling is about 15% of couples that go into premarital counseling end up not marrying. And when you first hear that statistic, you think, it's horrible. People did not, they're not married. That's not good. They broke up. But how I see it is that premarital counseling achieved its objective, which was for both of them to understand each other better, how they interact with one another, and if that is optimal for them. And premarital counseling in these 15% of cases led them to believe you're not the right person for me. So there was success in that.
That was one of my questions, actually, is that when people come in for premarital counseling, can you tell looking at them that they are going to work out versus they're not going to work out?
Right.
And also, do they part ways after premarital counseling, which I guess you said
Yes.
that it has happened.
They do that. And as a counselor in these situations, or a mentor couple, which my wife and I have been, you get a sense about couples. But even in an optimal premarital counseling situation, you may have maybe 4 to 6 meetings with them over a period of a few months. So it is fairly limited, and your ability to assess a lot is limited by the amount of time you're spending with them. Now, most good premarital counseling programs involve personality, relationship type tests that are great tools to give you a little more insight. But we get a sense, and sometimes looking back, we feel like we got it right. But there's other times where your sense at first is, I just don't get a good feeling about this. And as you meet with them over a period of weeks, you suddenly realize, oh my gosh, this is such a great, they complement each other so well. So at times I'm correct, and other times I've been surprised.
So let me ask you this. Can you determine in the sessions that the statement that a person is making, could be a girl or the boy,
Yes.
that they are going to stay true to that, uphold the commitment?
Yeah, and that's a great question, because this resource of individuals counseling with you and tests that you take about relationships and personalities are only as good as you being honest and you knowing yourself enough to be honest. Because sometimes you believe you're responding in a certain way, but you don't really see how other people see you. You may believe something that it really is not correct. So we're basing a lot of our assessment on those two things. If individuals are either intentionally dishonest, or again, they don't know themselves enough to answer honestly, we might arrive at an incorrect conclusion. So that can happen.
Yeah.
But it is a big investment of time, and in some cases money. So in general, people that are stepping up to it, that are investing this time and this money, are going to say, I'm going to try to get as much as I can. Right.
Yeah, definitely. So what are the various topics that you cover during the session?
Well, it's a number. I mean, there are like 10 to 15 different areas that we look into. Relationship dynamics are a big one that we lead with. Communication, of course, is another important one.
I feel like communication is a big thing.
And it almost touches in every area. Yes.
I really, really believe in the power of communication.
Exactly. We have another topic, which is conflict resolution. Kind of like how to, and fight is it's not a correct word in this.
No, but you are right.
But how to fight fair, in a sense.
Yes.
There's things that are constructive that you can do in a disagreement, and there's things that can be destructive.
Definitely.
So we do cover that. Partner personality and habits. Financial management is very important.
I think that's another major.
It's a huge one. Things like leisure activities, families and friends. How does that dynamic fall into it? What do they think of the relationship? How do they contribute in a positive or negative way to the relationship? The view of the couple of relationship roles as this, kind of a relationship moves towards marriage. How do they each view roles? And it's something we discuss pretty openly. Things like parenting expectations. It's something that many couples may not think about till they're there. And it can, be the big question of, are we going to have any children? At times, that's not even brought up in some relationships, and there may be different views on it that need to be hashed out.
I think a lot of times we tend to assume.
Yes, exactly.
Things, yeah.
Exactly. Based on some little thing that they may have mentioned, or she or he mentioned at some time, and we create an answer out of that.
Yeah,
may not be correct.
Like for example, kids that you said, kids, what's there to talk about? Of course they're going to want kids.
Exactly.
I love kids, yeah.
And it might be a situation where you see your partner interact with a child at some point in your dating relationship, and they were doing so well, and you immediately think, they love kids. They're going to want lots of kids. And you get married and you find out,
just an example.
I'm not interested in having children. And that comes as a big shock. But you're right. That's just one example of where, going back to your earlier point, communication is so critical. And then we talk about things like spiritual beliefs, physical intimacy is also a topic, and family of origin. So much of who we are is based on where we come from.
Yeah.
How our own parents interacted. Was there divorce in the family? In some cases, was there abuse in the family? And those are topics that we cover because they impact who those people are today.
And also about shared beliefs. I believe like it's not just shared beliefs, but how you show up in your actions too.
Yes, exactly. Who a person is, and the better they understand themselves, the better it is for the relationship. But who that person is so critical to the health of that relationship. One of the authors, there's a book that we recommend during this process, and it's called The Meaning of Marriage. It's by a gentleman by the name of Tim Keller. And in it, he makes this pretty, as we talk about what are things that can happen in a relationship and a marriage that can hurt it the most? What are these drivers on it? And Tim Keller says that the biggest reason that marriages fail and relationships fail is our own selfishness. And he says that your selfishness is the main problem in a marriage, and that a marriage, in addition to that, reveals your own selfishness and how much it's about us and not about the other person. And in this book, he does talk about how important it is to put the other person ahead of yourself. And if both individuals are doing that, you have a very healthy, growing relationship.
Yeah. So these are, I feel like, very important things, even when two people are going out.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. And that's where hopefully you start seeing who that other person is in that period of time. In a kind of couple mentoring relationship in this premarital counseling, you try to prompt that through questions in these tests, and you ask about how you feel about doing this or doing that, and then you match both couples' responses together. They number of questions from 1 to 5, and you match where there's differences, and they do come up, and that's an opportunity to tell one person or say to one person, you said that you didn't believe in doing this, and yet you, the other person, you believe that you should be doing this. So let's talk about that. And to your point of communication again, and I think that's a great, that undergirds everything that we talk about, but this hasn't been talked about by this couple, and it gives you a kind of a platform to do so.
So at what point during the dating period would you recommend that couples go for premarital counseling? Yeah.
It can help, to your point, it can help anyone. Where we typically see people is when they have started talking about getting engaged or they're already engaged.
Okay.
So that they're at that point. But yes, it can help any long-term relationship because, you kind of kick off, as I mentioned, one of the first areas that you look at are relationship dynamics. And, kind of what does this marriage mean to you, and how are you two interacting with one another, or how does your relationship, future marriage, look like to you? And and you mentioned this a little bit earlier. You alluded to how there's a lot of romantic notions of marriage, and particularly when you're dating early on, they can be overwhelming. They can just, it's like a wave in the ocean.
Dating gives a very optimistic picture, yeah.
Yes, and again, this book that we recommend, The Meaning of Marriage, and Tim Keller, he said, and I love this quote, he said, "It is an illusion that if we find our one true soulmate, everything wrong with us will be healed."
Say that again.
It is an illusion that if we find our one true soulmate, everything wrong with us will be healed.
Yeah.
So essentially saying, if I tend to be lonely, if I tend to be sad, once I get married to this person, that is going to go away.
No.
And so, and it puts this unfair burden on
the other person,
because they cannot fill that need. And when they do drop the ball on something, in your view, you will be disappointed in the relationship and yourself, and there'll be this huge crash. So we try to emphasize from the very beginning that any relationship is made of two people, and as we know each other, we are not perfect individuals. We have faults, we make mistakes, And to look on that person to fill all our needs is unfair to them and ultimately unfair to ourselves.
Yeah. So, what are some of the good communication insights? I mean, I'm a big believer in communication.
Yes. When you think communications, we typically think you need to be communicating, the quantity aspect of it. And that is important. You need to do that. But the quality side of that communication is just as important.
No, both quantity
Yes.
and the quality. I would say quantity, quality. I would even say tone, the way you talk.
Correct. Exactly. We have a tremendous. I also was involved for a time in some crisis marriage counseling. So this was not the premarital. This is 10, 20 years down the road where there were marriages in trouble. And many of the couples were middle-aged couples where their focus of their communication, their whole being had been all around their children. And growing up, taking them to sports activities, academics, helping with their homework, going to their theater, going to the sports events. And there was a lot of communication regarding that. And then all of a sudden, this couple's children eventually go away to college. They get their first jobs, they move out. And this couple has very little or nothing to talk about.
That's when it hits you, yeah.
Exactly. And so, going back to the quality of, it's not just quantity, because these couples were having a lot of it. It just centered around their children. But it's the quality aspect of, are you talking about things that, how you feel, for example, your feelings to the other person, or what makes you happy, what makes you unhappy? And do you have proper tools in communication? Sometimes in relationships, one person may be very talkative, the other one a little bit quieter. And we'll talk about that when we get to personality. But sometimes the one that is more talkative, the exercise that they need to go to is something called active listening, which is, once the other person says something, that you actually repeat back what they just said before you make your next comment.
Yeah.
And that forces that person that's typically, their minds are running 80 miles an hour, they've got 1,000 things to say, they're not really listening. They're thinking about the next thing that's going to come out of their mouth. That forces them to slow down, listen to what you just say, and to say something back like, now, I hear what you said. You were not happy with what occurred, last night. Is that correct? Yes. Well, let me tell you what I think. And then gives you an opportunity to say, but that is constructive communication as opposed to not listening and one-sided communication.
And I think that's where the personality types come into.
Yes.
There are people who have, what is it called? The avoidant attachment skill.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And they don't want to talk.
Right. Exactly. And, the reality about human relationships is that typically we are attracted to our opposites.
Yeah.
In general, in our experience, and the literature tells you that in general, there's exceptions, but in general, if you're a very talkative, extroverted person, you're going to end up being married to a quieter, more thoughtful person. That's just how it works. If you tend to be someone that, for example, personality-wise, is a little messier, less loose with things around the house, for example, you'll marry someone that tends to be very structured about where things go, where they should be, and on and on. It's unfortunate, though, that in many situations, couples, as they progress through their marriage, or it could be a long-term relationship, what attracted them in the first place, that person was. So if you were quiet, the other person's so talkative, you admire that. It's like how they can go into a big group and they can just feel free to talk. You admire that as a quiet person. But maybe 10 years down the road, you're thinking to yourself, why can't he or she just shut up? I just want some quiet. So what attracted you and what you appreciated of the person after so many years becomes something that is not. And essentially you're saying, why can't that person be more like me? And
so we forget.
We do forget. And what attracted us to them, and we kind of forget, and we kind of underscore this in the counseling, that things like habits, can change and people can improve on that. But how you are made and how God made you is something unique to that person that is not open to change. All of us can, if we're a little quieter, we can, over the years learn to be a little bit outgoing. If we're talking, we can listen a little more. But overall, our personality is our personality. And one personality is not better than the other one. One is not wrong, one is not right. We're just different. And we kind of try to bring that out during the meeting. And we do tell them in the course of these meetings that at some point in time, you may not like how that other person is. Some couples, and when you get into personality types, some are
we can talk about that.
Are thinkers, and they approach any situation or problem by doing a mental pros and cons, and then to the list, and they add up one side, they add up the other side. It's very analytical. Therefore, we're not going to do it because the cons. And the other couple tends to be more feeling oriented. They rely on their feelings a lot, and they say, I just don't like that particular house that we're going to buy because it doesn't feel right. Whereas the other person is saying, but look, the mortgage is right, the price is better than it, and it's just two different people. Again, two different ways of looking at it. One is not right, one is not wrong, but it's something.
Personality.
Exactly, and it's just something they need to talk about, appreciate the input of each other, and come to a joint decision.
So is that something you can tell when people are dating?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, as a
personality.
couple?
No, as a couple.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think that I come back to that we do need to pay more attention.
Right. Exactly. But
to people who are
But oftentimes in the moment of this romantic, wave that has hit us, we may not look that closely and think through closely what is my partner really like.
So
but it's there.
You talk about all this
we do.
In the premarital counseling?
We do. And we get a little bit of pushback because oftentimes, at least one, sometimes both of the people sitting in front of me are in the full throes of romance. There's something called, and counselors refer to in psychologists, idealistic distortion that occurs in premarital counsel situations. And that is the extent to which a person distorts in a positive direction. So typically we think of distortion as a negative, but they're actually looking at their partner or at the relationship, and they think of it more positively than it really is.
Why do they do that?
To describe romance is
because
to
I
talk
know
about,
exactly what you're talking about. Yeah,
it's to talk about the heart and feelings, and that that initial feeling that you get a sense with a partner that just seems to be perfect for you. They care for you. Every time you see them, you want to hold hands. You want to spend more time.
Yeah.
But it's the emotions which, as we know, can come and go during a period of times. It's really the commitment to a person that is what lasts forever. It's what'll hold you. It's the glue.
What kind of expectations can hurt a relationship? And I'm going to say relationship because I think it's we're talking about premarital, so it's important.
Right.
And plus, I've told my kids to watch this too.
Oh, yeah, and that's great advice. I think that all of us. I think if we look hard and honestly at ourselves, we'll see that we have some needs. We're needy in some. There's things that are lacking. People wrestle with inferiority about a number of different things. Boys and girls. It happens. Both sides, and in a relationship, those areas that we feel some inferiority to seem to be cured by this person. And a lot of it has to do with this, great emotion, positive emotion that we feel towards this person. And we never tell emotions are bad. I mean, emotions are who we are. There's good emotions, they're bad. So it's not that you don't want to have them, but you want to be able to think through them and, look at yourself very honestly and say, this is the type of person I am, and this is the kind of person I need to be with. So, I think the bottom line, if I had just one very short piece of advice for someone that's dated, expectation is understand that there are huge emotions washing through you, and this person may be the one you spend the rest of your life with, but understand that your thinking is clouded dramatically by how you're feeling right now. So to the degree that you can step back and take a hard look at that person, you're doing great. But even if you can't, what I would counsel is talk to your friends, talk to your parents, and ask them, what do you think about Sally, or what do you think about Joe? Give me your thoughts on it. And how are we as a couple? And you may hear something you don't like, but internalize it, sit down and think it through. And there may be a lot of wisdom in that, whatever you hear back. And sometimes friends and families are the ones that are kind of independent of the situation and can give us great feedback.
Yeah, because you're watching it from far. Yeah.
Exactly. Because, sometimes you talking about, again, relation dynamics, there's couples where one person is very dominant in that relationship. And it can even reach a little bit of an unhealthy level where the other person almost loses themselves. They lose their own interests, their own desires, because it's all about the dominant person. But because you're caught up in this, because the person loves you so much, you don't see it, or you choose not to see it. But parents or friends that are watching will see that very quickly, and they'll be able to say, look, this person you're with dominates you so much, doesn't allow you to think for yourself, make your own opinions. You never end up doing anything you want to do. It's always this other person's. But you don't, if you're in it, you don't often see it.
No, when you're in the situation, you cannot see it. Yeah.
Right.
It's other people who can.
Exactly.
So you mentioned when we started talking that there has been cases where couples have come for premarital counseling, and then they decided not to get married.
Correct.
Can you just give some examples?
Yeah. There's several that come to mind. I mean, specific couples. One of them dealt with the whole parenting side, and
so whether to have kids
or not, correct. And it was only in our session that she had a great desire to have children, and he came out during one of our sessions and said, "I do not want to have children. I think they tie me down. I want to be free to go and travel, and I don't want to be tied down." And they hadn't really talked about it. She thought that he was very open to that, and that was a clear break. Now, it was very hard for her. It didn't happen right away, but she kind of had to think about it a lot, and eventually came to the conclusion, children are important enough to me that I can't continue this. So that was one situation. And that was a little bit more clear-cut because it's a yes or no. There's a few other cases where it was an issue of dominance by the man in the relationship from the guy, and she did not see that originally. As we discussed, we started to bring that out because as it answered questions, there were differences between the two of them, and it tended to be what he wanted, and there was very little budging on his part. And as we started discussing it, and kind of you do the probing questions of, do you feel this is fair? And, don't you want to do X and this person wants to do Y? I think eventually they started slowly realizing, and she did, that this may not be the best guy for him. And when they left our premarital counseling, it hadn't been a hard breakup, but they had postponed their wedding plans and were going to give some time together. We later heard that they had not ended up getting married.
Oh.
Yeah.
Have you had to tell a couple that this may not work? Or, I mean, is that something that you would say it if you saw it?
We did premarital counseling for a good decade. And in that time, I think in general, what the program is meant to do is just bring things to light that can be discussed by the couple. We don't we don't go beyond that. I mean, we may have our opinions of but we just try to bring things to light out in the open and let them decide. But
sometimes two people, and even we see it, they're just so different.
Yes.
That even when I see them together, and I don't even have the experience of a counselor, but even it comes to my mind that how did they even choose to
be together.
Yeah,
I know.
Yeah.
It is.
So it's hard when you are, doing multiple sessions with somebody.
Correct. It is. And, and we do see stuff, and through questions and feedback, we try to get them to discuss the issues that we're having. Okay. And hopefully that brings some insight to them. But there was one couple where we felt, in this case, the guy, was demonstrating emotional abusiveness to the girl through things that he would say, the words he'd use to address her, and throughout the process, we just felt that he was tearing her down rather than building her up, kind of the opposite of what a good marriage. We could see that even in our sessions, and generally, I think you alluded this earlier. Yeah, many times people try to hide it. They'll try to hide it, and then you can kind of see things. In this one, he was pretty unabashed about it, and it was out in the open. And towards the end, we recommended that they not move forward, and that was our conclusion. But that was the only time we did that. Other time, like I said, when we see differences, we're trying to get them to talk about it.
You want them to start thinking and talking about it.
Exactly. Yeah.